Hey, welcome everyone. This is Larry Johnson, founder of the Eight Principles, and another Eight Principles Voices podcast. And I'm delighted to have with me today Dmitri Sunshine. See the smile on his face? Okay, must be a pretty happy guy. And he's going to bring us information on a lot of things. But one of the things is saged solutions. Sage solutions. No, we're not talking about CRMs. And he's got another thing he wants to talk about with regarding foundations and nonprofits. But I'm going to delve some other places too. So he better get ready. So I want you to welcome Dmitri Sunshine. Welcome, Dmitri.
Thank you so much. What a
Okay.
beautiful introduction.
So where'd you come from? Meaning me with that is, are you a native of this country? Where were you born? Give us a little bit of a history there, a little context, not a lot, but just a little.
Okay. So I was actually born in the Soviet Union, which is where I was born is actually modern day Ukraine. And I never actually spoke Ukrainian or really understood that part of the culture because it was wiped out by the Soviet Union, right? It was essentially everyone had to, in all the Soviet Union republics, everyone had to speak Russian. Everyone lived in the exact same buildings. And so I got to grow up through the fall of the Soviet Union, which was actually something that I'm really grateful for. Having gone through that experience makes me it makes me ecstatic every day that I wake up in America, right?
I
When
guess
you
so.
go through, yeah, when you go through something where, for example, your mom is going to go wait in the line to hopefully get milk before it runs out, and you have to, as like a 6-year-old boy, go wait in the line where you might get butter if it doesn't run out. And hopefully your mom makes it there in time because she's got the coupons. It's that's a pretty stressful experience to grow up and then come here where I think it feels unrealistic to
Mm-hmm.
immigrants when you first come to the US and you see what we have here.
I know I read some stories. That well, back in the they occurred maybe back in the '60s when Russians who defected and came over here, they were simply just like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They go into the supermarket in such abundance, such everything, and there were no riots, no chaos. Everything was just kind of happening normally. Hey, just get in line, and we're all going to get there. And that was what I remember. There was an article about it was written by someone who defected, and that was one of the things that really, really stuck with them was the abundance of everything, and they had not seen that. But I want to know something. You have a very distinct, nice, articulate voice. How did you lose your Russian accent? How did that work?
So my family and I came here when I was 7,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that is right before that language gap.
I see.
And there was such a strong emphasis on assimilation,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was clearly this refugee type of mindset of like, forget, we're not going to speak Russian anymore, right? So I lost a lot of my native tongue. It's
I see.
when I went back when I was 18, I was like a mime trying to talk
Mm-hmm.
to family members because it's like the words don't come out anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I have a friend who's actually one of our A principles coaches, and he came here with the fall of the Soviet Union. But I think he was older when he came here
Mhm.
because he's very Russian. He's very Russian, and it's kind of nice. I kind of like that. Larry. I'm Russian, Russian. Um, a very fine man. Actually, I
Yeah.
like him a lot, but you don't have any of that, and I'm like, okay, fine. So do you like Russian music, Russian opera,
No, no, it's
Russian
kind
literature?
of no. I mean, I left that culture behind.
Okay, all right. Well, I enjoy Stravinsky and Gurunov and Dostoevsky. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, Brothers Karamazov, one of the great novels of all time. Not in the original Russian, Dmitri. I have to read it in the English translation. But uh, um, my my wife prefers a little less heady literature, and I got
Hmm.
her to read Anna Karenina, and so she was reading it, and I she likes happy endings, Dmitri. So we were part of a book group, and one of the members of the book group said to her, "Have you got to the part where she throws herself in front of the train?" And my
Okay.
and my wife said, "No, I haven't." She put the book down and she didn't pick it up again. I didn't tell her about that scene. Okay.
Wow.
Well, enough rattling around. So you came here as a boy of 7. Then what did you do? You grew up,
Uh,
went to
I had
school.
immense cultural shock. That's what I did. Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing when I think about the generosity. We landed in this very sweet elders home, Margaret and Howard, who had probably done this for countless other families, where, we cut off the airplane and went right into an American home in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, like downtown. And it was fascinating to come into this culture that I did not expect at all. And to see how much people didn't have to help each other, but they were willing to. And somewhere like the Soviet Union, you have to help each other, right?
Oh.
It's so tough. In a place like America, especially in an with an affluent family, there's no need to, right? So if somebody's doing this, they're doing it completely out of the goodness of their heart, not because
Mm-hmm.
they're hoping that they're going to get some rewards back from their neighbors when they need help themselves. So that was, I think that was a lot more foundational than I probably give it credit for.
Okay. Well, I don't know how much American history you know, but there was a French nobleman by the name of Alexis de Tocqueville. Are you familiar with that name?
No.
Well, Alexis de Tocqueville was a French nobleman in the 18th century. And right after we achieved our independence and was founded as a country, I guess the first, 10 or 15 years of the 19th century, he came over here and toured America because at that time, self government was just, what is this all about? We don't get this. How do you do
Right.
this? And what you probably know is that, all the powers of the world were just waiting for this to collapse so they could pounce. Whether it's France or whatever. France was a little more interested in us as an ally than the others. The English were just waiting for their opportunity again. But he toured the country and then he wrote this book, Democracy in America. And I would encourage you to read it. You can buy it. It's even now in print. And he observed something that he'd never seen anywhere else in the world. And he traveled just, pretty much all over the world. That Americans helped each other. They came together in common communities and associations for common good. So that philanthropy has been a part of who we are since the very beginning. And as a Frenchman, a European, coming here and seeing this, it was so stark to him. And that's what the book is about. And that's where people get where the notion of American exceptionalism comes from, that we're different from any other nation. We're also different from any other nation is that we're bound by an idea, not an ethnicity. You see,
Hmm.
that's what holds us together, not an ethnicity, but an idea. And that idea is the Declaration of Independence. That's where it starts. And so, and he noticed it. He was like, wow. So that's, why, Americans that's just who they are. Um, and I think it came out of a lot of things, the need to. We started from the Anglosphere, although there are other people from other parts of the world are here now that wanted to come and be a part of it. So yeah, it's an idea. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people who are born Americans don't understand that. They just take it for granted. Um,
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's where it's interesting when people have anger against immigrants, right? Without realizing that's like, hey, they actually really appreciate this country probably more than a lot of people who have been here their whole lives. Because
mhm,
if you haven't experienced anything else, it's easy to take for granted.
mhm. Yes. Well, my family were immigrants, but a very, very long time ago.
Hmm.
um, um, I my first ancestor to come to this country immigrated from England in 1625. So that's been a while. Um,
Hmm.
and that's been a while. But well, let's talk about now. You're into nonprofits, so somehow you grew up in Georgia, and you're living in Boulder now. So
Correct.
how did you get to Boulder?
Ah, serendipity. I think that there was, so for me, a big part of my life's purpose is actually dedicated towards creating co-living communities. It's something that came out of this dark night of the soul, as Stan Grops calls it, when I was
Mm-hmm.
30 and suddenly found myself getting divorced, and really kind of hitting what was rock bottom for me and realizing there's actually something missing, right? Before that, I was on this typical trajectory. Me and my ex-wife, we had this company together. We had a son. We were living, the typical American dream. And I didn't think anything else was needed. I thought, okay, this is how life is. You just enjoy this ride. And that dark night of the soul really made me question, what am I doing here? How do I
Mm-hmm.
show up? And it was fascinating because it was the first time I really started to understand a lot of psychology, a lot of transpersonal psychology. And I went to a co-living community on the big island of Hawaii. It was a little retreat center, but also had quite a few full-time residents. And it really opened my eyes to a whole nother world where it felt so supportive. And it felt it felt unrealistic in kind of the same way as coming to the United States was when I was a child. Like this is, I don't believe in the, typical utopian dream that we can all live in eco villages. I don't think that's for everybody. And I think that is for certain parts of our lives. But for me, co-living has been a vehicle and a catalyst for personal growth because there's nowhere to hide. And it's also one of the best natural forms of therapy. Like if you're recovering from a, deeply traumatic episode in your life, I find that being in a community with people, especially if they're spiritual, or even if they're not, but as long as they are introspective, if they have introspective qualities about them, they're going to ask questions that will be the equivalent of going to a therapist, except now you're in a much more natural setting. Your guard is down. So I found that immensely helpful for my personal journey and coming out of this, what felt like rock bottom. Um, and so that's something that I've been actively seeking. And I actually created a community in Portland that was a 2 year long experiment. Um, a lot of good lessons came out of that. And right on the cusp of that ending, I was invited, me and my wife were invited to a co-living community here in Lyons, Colorado, which is a little north of Boulder,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on 40 just gorgeous acres. And it was so hard to pass up, especially after coming there, meeting the other people, seeing their aspirations. So it wasn't just to, share light together, it's also to create technology that would help people, right? That would leverage these key points. So I've been finding a lot of my life is it's a pulling more than a pushing. Like of course, I'm having to do some pushing, right? There's hard work, but it's like when one chapter is ending, something is just opening up and it's just kind of beckoning. So we came out here for that. Of course, like most intentional communities that end up falling apart. Polyamory was something that they practiced there, which has never resonated with me. And luckily, both me and my wife are monogamous. So we were in our little bubble, but we got to see the drama playing out from that. Um,
You know,
and I
there
think
was,
there's,
I don't know what you know about American history, but there was a whole period in the 19th century where there were several of these utopian communities. The Shakers, there's several others, and they were pretty much in the near Midwest, like
Mhm.
Kentucky, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. You know, the Case Western Reserve, the Western Reserve area, where there were a number of these, and they coincided primarily with the Second Great Awakening, which was, you know, this national revival to Christianity. But there were these individual, yeah. So Americans always have had the proclivity for doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I find it's always a social experiment, right? The initial ones I think were full-blown communes
Hmm.
with the, you know, profit sharing and sharing of everything, apparently.
Well, and of
I
course you have the when you have the Shakers and one of their requirements is celibacy, it doesn't ensure continuity. It's they had to they had no, it doesn't. They had to adopt orphans to
oh,
stay alive. That was the way they did it. And then, of course, there were fewer and fewer orphans available um, to adopt, and so they eventually died out.
hmm. Yeah, a, that should have been foreseen.
Well, when the foundress has received this vision that includes this, well, you know that it tends to, perpetuate itself, and that came out of some very bad personal experiences of her own, which this kind of thing usually does. So, but anyway, yes, it should have been obvious, but when you think you've got a steady supply of unwanted children without parents, well, we can take them in and we can raise them. So, all right.
Well, I feel joy hearing about the fact that that was probably contributing to a lot more kids getting adopted that might otherwise not have,
Mm-hmm.
because that was where I actually started my career, is working in adoptions and international and domestic adoptions, and seeing that world was fascinating because there was so much competition in that world. Everyone wants to adopt a little, white, healthy baby. That's essentially what it comes down to, right? That's the if you looked at their criteria, and then there's it's really challenging for children who are of color, um, especially if it's. I mean, there's been trends. For example, like Ethiopia adoptions was trending. Um, there have been trends, but overall, it's it's a really skewed system. It was really painful to see it from the kind of the inside view. This
Now,
this was something.
when I was smaller, I mean, closer to being a child, there were a lot of adoptions from China and from Korea. Um, in fact, I have a good friend who was he's Korean. Now he's what, in his late 40s, early 50s, and he was adopted as a child or an infant by a couple here. So I guess, as you said, it goes through seasons. Um,
It does, and it's because international adoptions isn't a steady open window. So something like Ethiopia became really trendy because they finally opened up fully to international adoption. And so there's these waves that you'll see, right? Where they open up, there's a huge pool of children that need to be adopted. And it's also, it's something in your community, right? If someone else adopts from a country, and you say, oh, okay, like your kids look amazing. I would love to also have, amazing kids like this. So it's easy for it to become this kind of trend in the community, which is, I think, a great thing overall.
mhm. Okay, so you did that for a while, and but now we're talking about something totally different. We're talking about a system to help nonprofits, Saged, which may change its name, and then this other thing you told me about bringing fund foundations together, which I remember we had a previous conversation, and I sort of rained on your parade. Um, but you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So our backbone is our enterprise management software, right? So that's what
Hmm.
Sage Solutions does. But the crux of the issue that I see and the biggest leverage point would be able to, if we can get foundations to be able to see the nonprofit ecosystem in a much more level playing field where they're able to have a scoreboard essentially. So they're able to give grants much more easily to smaller nonprofits who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford doing the typical grant writing.
Okay. So there's uh, how would that actually work? Let's say I have a family foundation and we have an interest in elementary education.
Mhm.
How would that work?
So on the portal, you in Grantini, when you log in, you would have your metrics for what do you value most, right?
Hmm.
So in this case, it's education, it's younger children's education, and with that, the nonprofits who have gone through and answered our survey, their answers, based on the kind of impact that they're making, have different weights for each foundation. So your foundation will see the ones that are focused more in that area
Hmm.
and the ones that are actually making an impact, right? That can demonstrate the impact that they're making in their, in their zone. So you would see those at the top. You'd see the score that we've assigned to them, and it would allow you to get a better understanding of who is actually out there, because I think that that's really challenging.
Hmm. Right. I'm just wondering if the criteria for success, if my criteria for success should be the same as your criteria for success. For instance, I may be looking at social factors. You may be looking at academic factors. Maybe it's both. I don't know. But I'm just curious how you fit that all together.
Uh, to be honest, we're still figuring that out,
Ah,
right?
you
So
see,
it's
well, that's an honest answer. I'm glad you gave me an honest answer. That's terrific. See, and that's, I believe this is where we had the discussion before. And I was like, so, well, how's this work? Um, so it would, but it's you're creating it as a software platform that would mesh.
correct.
Is what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the
Okay.
long-term goal is that, so this enterprise management software that we have that's available to foundations now, so they can use as um, their grant application system. If that same software, if we could bring that into the nonprofits who are using this, so that it's one system that's able to share data between who's the grantee and who's the grantor, that I think would allow the grantors to be able to have a lot more real-time information to understand
Okay.
how is that grant being used.
Okay. All right. So, where do we go from here? What's the next step?
You're the maestro.
Oh, well, I'm just trying to figure out what you're planning to do next. Um, I mean, so you've got the software and you're continuing to use it. You're writing a book on me. I don't know about.
uh, Not yet. We could talk about that if you
Okay.
wanted to. I mean, I think your book is doing pretty well so far.
Well, it's been out a few years, and I wrote it with the idea of allowing non-professionals to understand what philanthropy, well, what fundraising is all about. An interesting thing about that, it's turned out to be generally applicable even to professionals because a lot of the time they only understand the mechanics, and even
Mhm.
then, maybe poorly, and so they look at it in a mechanical way, and they don't understand, what's really driving the paradigm, what's really happening, and to it, that's why a lot of the money is left on the table because they don't understand donors, they don't understand why they do what they do, and as a result, and they don't understand the real role that donors play. See, as you
Mhm.
know, the vast majority of donations or philanthropic money comes from individuals in one form or the other. excuse me, either a living individual or one who's deceased, or through some other vehicle that's really an individual, like a private foundation or a donor advised fund known as a DAF. And
Mhm.
so that's about 90% of it right there. So the corporate stuff and the independent foundations is really the minor part of the picture. But I'm sure you've seen this as well as I have. There are a lot of nonprofit organizations that actually spend the bulk of their money and time chasing those gifts, the corporations and the large independent foundations. And unless you are in a very narrow sweet spot that has one of those, where you have one of those organizations' ears, it's difficult to create a program from that kind of giving, especially since a lot of it is very purposed. It's not here's some money, go and use it. No, they have a very narrow idea of where it's going and what their expectation is.
Yeah.
So, so tell me a little bit. I want to know a little bit about. You don't have to name them, but choose a client that uses your software and tell me a little bit about how that client uses it.
So we don't have clients for Sage Solutions yet. So this is still something that we're essentially holding back on doing active marketing, because what we actually think is that if we can get this Grantini platform, we may go a completely different route than doing
Oh,
individual
okay.
solicitations to the foundations to use our software. So while there
Oh, okay.
is a product available and we're open to working with organizations that they come to us, we're put it this way, my first company, it felt very inundated when you do tons of marketing and now you're stuck with a particular, like, the clients that we had were amazing. I'm so grateful for the initial set of clients who were willing to take a chance on you. And at the same time, now you're kind of stuck in a cycle. It's really difficult to
Mhm.
get out of that. So I've been very apprehensive to actually um, put this out there as something like strongly push for this. So there's a website, there's a product, but we're not pushing it.
Okay, well, I saw the product. So, where do we stand on the other platform? How you doing? When do you think you're going to launch it? Um,
So right now we're reaching out to foundations to try to understand this world from their lens better. Because for me, the one of the biggest challenges is having to make those design decisions at the get-go. And when you're making it from a completely theoretical standpoint, it's so much harder than when you actually have somebody who's like, we would love to use this. Here's how we'd want to use it.
all right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because I think a lot of organizations, they're like they're busy first of all, and so they want to. It's like they'd be willing to give something a chance if you have something ready to use, right? If Grantini had some
mhm,
sort of
yeah.
MVP, and at the same time, I think that sometimes you lose people. You lose people when they go in there. They're like, "Nah, this isn't. This is not good enough," and then that's it.
Hmm.
So it's always a fine balancing act.
Okay. Would you, for our audience, define the acronym MVP?
MVP in the startup world is minimal viable product.
Hmm.
So sometimes that's something just scraped together that barely functions, but at least shows people what this could do. Um, Usually that's done by teams who um, don't really have a technical founder on hand, or they need to get funding. So they have to put something out there. But if you have a technical founder, your MVP should be a lot less minimal.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about minimum viable product where it works, but you're using it as a way just to start developing. Um,
To
um,
show people a basic concept.
Reminds me of when Steve Jobs rolled out the iPhone in
Mhm.
2007. Just think, it hasn't been 20 years. It hasn't been 20 years yet, really. Um, so when he showed it on stage, half of it didn't even work. He was kind of faking it as he went through it, and he was just
Mhm.
hoping that it didn't crap out on him when he was trying to do it up there in front of everybody. But I mean, he was promising people stuff that they were working on it, but they weren't. It wasn't functional yet. But he was acting as though this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, it subsequently became very powerful, but at that time he was way out there, and people I don't think really understood that some of it was smoke and mirrors at that point, and so,
Mhm.
but he knew it was coming. Are you like that? Are you way out there?
Uh, I try to balance it. I really try to balance with the because here's the thing, if you're a technical founder, you can make promises that you know you can keep because you know you can build it yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different story if you're not technical. Now you're beholden on someone else being able to complete this and usually paying a lot of money to
Yeah.
some team and trusting that team puts it together. And then when the next team comes on board, they're probably like, whoever worked on this before was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the thing. Every team
Okay.
comes on and says the same thing.
And they want to change it.
They want to completely rewrite it. It's easier
Mm-hmm.
to rewrite software than it is to fix it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So
So,
that's why you got to get everything right in the beginning.
you don't particularly look like a techie. Um,
I'll take
I'm
that as
sure
a compliment.
well, I do take it as a compliment because when I think of a techie, I think of someone with um, um, bottle top glasses and kind of a pale complexion, a little bit on the emaciated side. Never sees daylight pretty much. But you don't fit that profile. Uh, what do you do when you're not inventing?
Uh, what do I do? I most of my life I'm pulled into work. So I'm the guy working through the weekends because that's the best time. It's the best time to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody's going to disturb you. It's very quiet time. Um, but I will say this, so growing up in the Soviet Union, I got immensely sick as a child.
Oh,
And
really?
it was to the point, yeah, it was to the point where, the doctors couldn't really do stuff. They were taking me to like witch doctors, just really desperate to figure out what's wrong. And I did end up getting better. They did a blood transfusion from my father, which is interesting. And that helped a lot. And when I tell doctors here, they're like, yeah, I've
Hmm.
never heard of that. Like, oh, worked for me. Um,
Uh,
anyway, so I think going through that experience, I have it's made me into a health nut. I have a lot more appreciation for my health, and so I
okay.
definitely try to um, take all the supplements that allows me to keep going strong, so I don't feel like I'm depleting myself. And we live Boulder's no Boulder's the kind of place that no matter how fit you are, you will feel out of shape if you go somewhere like some of the popular trails.
Yeah.
It is so elite in the athlete sense.
Yeah. Well, you're up there pretty high, which reduces the amount of oxygen you're taking in. Oh yeah, I can see that. I can see that. So, you eat healthy. What do you do for exercise? You a biker or a swimmer or weightlifter? Or,
Uh, Honestly, I do very little, or at least feels like I do very.
oh, okay. Well, you look pretty good
Yeah,
to
I
me.
mean, thank you. I think that was from getting bullied as a kid, and then feeling like I need to go work out. Otherwise, I'm going to keep getting bullied, which was a great way. I mean, if anybody has kids, I'm like, please get your kids into to weight training when they're younger.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that was my introduction to meditation because if
Oh.
you're doing extremely heavy weightlifting, you have to be so present. You have to be
Mm-hmm.
so in tune with your breath. So that to me, I think was a beautiful start. I'm grateful for those bullies now, right? Otherwise, I don't think I
Mm-hmm.
would have been going to the gym nonstop. and um, and I don't think I would have gotten into meditation as easily.
Okay. All right. Um, so give me a timeline. What's next for you?
Uh, well, right now I am looking for those allies, those magical
Mhm.
adopters that want to revolutionize this grant application process because they see how asinine it actually is. It sucks, it sucks on both for both ways, right? To be the grantee who's hoping and they're putting so much effort into putting together all these grant applications. And then for the grantor to go through all those grant applications, right? Instead of being able to see it in a much more objective light.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what would you like to add that I haven't asked? It's
Mm.
wide open, Dmitri.
Well, I'd love more of your opinion on this world. Where would you like to see the world of philanthropy go? What do you think is the next evolution?
Well, what I always preach is that nonprofit organizations need to treat their philanthropic donors as investors, um,
Mm,
because they are investing. But the trick is for the nonprofit to understand that they're not investing in their organization per se. They're investing in their own dreams and values. And the organization simply becomes a conduit for that. And if you can really appreciate that and all that that implies, you can raise a great deal more money than if you're just holding your hand out wanting money for whatever. Um, but it's hard because nonprofits have a hard time getting over themselves. They think they're
mm,
doing such great work, and they are so well motivated, and yada 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 yada. But that's not really what drives it. What I tell people is that if you can give your investor an experience that you can't purchase, they will
mm,
literally throw money at you. Then, and you look at that. I mean, you can see where I was doing something with at one point with a donor, and they when you finally listen to what they're telling you, then you're giving them something that they can't buy, and they will literally throw money at you, literally, literally. But that's hard because nonprofits have to adjust their paradigm, adjust
mhm,
their time frame, um, and then of course there's that whole view of fundraising as simply a transaction, which that's not what it is. You're giving people an opportunity to fill their deepest held values, and they're looking for a relationship if you'll give them one. Um,
mhm,
to wit, you wonder, well, just how bad is this? Well, you're familiar with a donor advised fund, I'm sure. You know what that is.
mhm,
Well, they're exploding in this country. And excuse me, the single largest nonprofit in this country by assets is Fidelity Investments, the, the nonprofit wing. They hold more assets than any nonprofit in the country, and that says a lot. If the simply a holding company for this money is has more assets than any single nonprofit, and so there's a great deal of money just sitting out there
yep. Yeah. It
waiting to be
feels,
engaged. Go
yeah.
ahead.
And so, what does that look like day to day, or what are the best examples that you've seen where nonprofits have been able to put like your eight principles into action and actually engage their donors continuously?
Well, I can give you my own, heuristic experience, but I can tell you that the research has been done that demonstrates that when you do adopt this different paradigm, and you're able to bring or donors to your organization emotionally to you, you get tremendous growth. And I mean, I've got, we've got the numbers. There's a gentleman that is in Texas Tech University, and depending on the size of the nonprofit, 5-year gains are 3, 4, 500% over against simply doing it the regular way or the old-fashioned way, whatever, the conventional approach. And you may ask, so what's the trigger that makes this difference? Well, he discovered that when you can cultivate your donors to the point where about 20% of them make at least one gift out of an asset, and that could be a fairly small gift, but it has to be an asset, not income, not cash. When you have about 20% of your base that has done that at least once, that seems to be the trigger that triggers this tremendous growth. And I think what's happening there is you have enough people in your base that have adopted this other paradigm of giving, because once someone makes a gift of an asset, even if it's a small gift, they are committed to you. They will sacrifice other things to continue to give to you because they're that committed. But that doesn't happen too often unless it's purposeful on the part of the organization. And I'll give you a perfect example. Ooh, what's with me today? Anyway, the room's well ventilated. I feel okay. Anyway, I know what it is. It's that wonderful, soft, sonorous voice that is lulling me to sleep, Dmitri. Anyway, enough of that. Um, here's I'll give you a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
This, here we are at the beginning of the year. Last summer, and this is a true story. There is a man who's a billionaire, ultra high net worth, who lives in a small town in Montana, about 5,000 people. He's very philanthropic, and he decides he wants to support this one organization. So he calls them up, and when you're in a town of 5,000 people, you're a known person. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Anonymity is really not possible, especially when you call and you identify yourself. And that's what happened. He called the office and said, "Hey, I'm Jack Smith," or Joe, whatever his name was. And he was speaking to the person who answers the phone. And he said, "I'm really interested in making an investment. I'd like to speak to," and he knew the name of the executive director. "I'd like to speak to Sally Jones." And here was the answer. "Oh, Mr. Smith, thank you so much for calling. Sally's really busy right now, and I think she'd be better if she called you toward the end of the year when we've done our gala already." You see where that's going? You
Mm-hmm.
see, and she was operating out of a totally different paradigm. And by the way, this is what the 8 principles does, is that we offer a training program that enables organizations, excuse me, enables organizations. I don't know what it is with me today, and I haven't been drinking either. All right. Uh, enables an organization to understand the investor point of view, so that and anyone can, when you call and you talk to anyone or board members, they right away understand what's important to an investor. So that if that young lady who answered the phone was perfectly polite, she wasn't rude or anything, she was just sort of, acting as, under the assumption she'd made. Instead, if she had said, "Oh, Mr. Smith, thank you so much for calling. Sally's on the phone right now, or she's at a meeting. When she's finished, I'll make sure that she calls you this afternoon. What phone number should she use?" You see the difference. You see,
Mm-hmm.
and he would be expecting a call back that afternoon. Okay, fine. Very different. Very different. And it's that tunnel vision, and you don't really understand what is driving this equation.
Yeah. I mean, in that story, it feels like there's multiple breakdowns
Mm-hmm.
happening, right? And yeah, it's painful when you think about that at scale.
Oh
The
yes.
amount of donors out there who are struggling to find where would my money have the biggest impact, right? How do I give for the largest impact possible?
Well, sometimes it's just getting somebody's attention, getting a call back when you express an
Mm-hmm.
interest. They're
Mm-hmm.
not even to the other stage yet. Um, the That's why, for instance, donor advised funds are so popular, and they're growing by nights. And here's the irony: most nonprofits seem to most nonprofits adopt a hostile attitude toward DAFs, donor advised funds. Oh, if
Mm.
it wasn't for those donor advised funds, blah blah blah. Well, what's driving donors to donor advised funds? Because organizations aren't engaging their potential investors. That's why, because these people are looking to do something with their money. They want to park it someplace. And
Mm-hmm.
so a DAF is a very convenient place to put it. They get a deduction if they're eligible for one. It's sitting there making more money for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can pull the trigger on it to send it someplace at any time. So it's sort of just sitting out there. And it's a very convenient way to give. And typically, the people who make those kind of gifts, who have dabs, they have anywhere from 200 to $700,000 in assets. It's sort
Mm-hmm.
of a middle level giving, not super high giving. They don't use dabs, but then small gifts, say under 20,000 or something, generally don't use dabs. But that middle range, anywhere from say 25 to say five, $600,000, that's the sweet spot. And that's where a lot of giving happens, is right in
Mm.
that middle range. Um, so yeah, I mean, if nonprofits really understood, now here's, well, we can see each other, so I'll use my hands. Most nonprofits think of philanthropy in this way. Okay, I have a mission. I'm going to execute on my mission. Maybe I do a damn good job of it, for that matter. All right. But I need money. So I'm going to go out here to people that I think might be able to give to me. And I'm going to ask them for money. I'm going to get money from them, and I'm going to apply it to my mission. Well, okay. That works to a point, but think about something a little more transformative. Okay. And this is what I was talking about in terms of what's really been the research that's been done. There are people out here who really have certain values, for whom my work would be trained. They would really love to support that, but they need to be drawn in.
Mm-hmm.
They would be giving to you not so much about your mission, but about getting their sense of gratitude and contribution and reward, their self-realization. All right. And if you
Mm-hmm.
approach them on that basis, rather than trying to sell them on your mission per se, then you get transformative giving. So it's really two parties coming together to accomplish something that neither can do alone, but often for
Mm-hmm.
very different reasons. Often for very different reasons, so that investors expect a return, and that return is not tangible, but it's just as meaningful, perhaps more meaningful. You see, now nonprofits also make the mistake of not treating their investors as their customers, because they are the customers. The people who are impacted are the beneficiaries. They benefit from it, but they're not the customers. The customers are the investors. They're the ones that are looking for that return, although it's not tangible. And if you can figure that out for what that is for your nonprofit, you'll never have to worry about money again. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
people will almost throw money at you because it's so uncommon. And I think we talked about that if you can have about 20% of your donors, and you've drawn them close enough to your organization emotionally that they've made a gift out of an asset, even a small one, that's the trigger. The research shows that really results in this explosive giving. It's fascinating. Um, I can never remember the guy's name, but he's at Texas Tech that's done all the research. He used
Mm-hmm.
200,000 organizations over a 5-year period, and he demonstrated that when they get their first gift out of an asset, that's what triggers this growth. Um, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
How do they get to that point of even breaking through? Or let's talk about these. There's a lot of these young budding nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do they how do they make a splash initially?
Well, they have to start with the right leadership. It's all about leadership. And too often, as we say in the startup world, it's simply fools, family, and friends. And you have to kind of go beyond that. And
Mm-hmm.
what I tell nonprofits that approach me, I say, well, if you've already got a board, usually it has to be fixed in some way, okay, because you don't have the right people on there. And so the way to do that is not to fire people, but to grow yourself out of the problem by adding more people to your board till the people who are on there originally realize that the social contract has changed and they're going to get off and they'll do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you preserve people's dignity that way. But the key is if the board is an organic board, meaning it represents all the different constituencies you're going to be seeking support from, and then it has, you know, a variety of talents on there. In other words, you don't want all doctors, all bankers, all accountants, whatever it is. You don't want any of that. But in
Mm-hmm.
fact, I advise people you don't want any more than one banker and one accountant, period, or especially just one attorney, because those three people only know one word: no. Okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
you need to you don't want too many of the naysayers on there. So, anyway, the point is, then they have to be willing to contribute commensurate gifts of their own. And then in the beginning, you're using a referral network. You don't need social media and all that. I mean, you can do that, but that's not going to access the people you're really looking for. All right, that comes
Mm-hmm.
later. So then, if you've got the right board members, their job is to refer other people. Hey, Dmitri, I'm a part of this new nonprofit, and you might find this of interest. And have we talked about money? No. But I'm saying, would you like to get involved in some way? You see? And then when you approach donors, so Dimitri, what is it you'd like to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of intangible values and outcomes are you looking for? Well, you tell me. Have I talked about money yet? No. All right. And then later, when it's clear what you want to accomplish, I'd say, well, here's an idea, here's a proposal, and it would have a price tag on it. And you can tell me, well, hey, I had to like this. That's when it becomes about you and not about your money. and
Mm-hmm.
and, and that's what's so important. But anyone can start that way.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of but they think that social media is the new splash mail where you just kind of mail randomly. It's the same thing. Now that that can have value when you're building a constituency, but you usually don't start with that. You start it in a very targeted way, and you're building it from the inside out, top down, leadership down, inside out. And
Mm-hmm.
once you reach a certain point, then you have a critical mass and you can begin to do outreach in other ways. And that's would be your social media and things like that will draw even more people in.
So what I think I hear you saying is that your board members, your employees, everyone involved with your nonprofit is an evangelist at the
Mm-hmm.
early stages. They have
They
to
are.
be in order for
They
it to
have to
become
be.
successful.
That's
Yeah.
right. They have to be. Uh, there aren't any sugar daddies out there, Dimitri. Uh, I mean, I
Thanks
mean
for
that.
clarifying.
Well, that's what some nonprofits think. If they can just find the big one, they're going to
Yeah.
be set. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're so in love with independent foundations and corporations, which are the last place to go for that kind of thing. That giving is such a small portion of what's out there. It tends to be very restrictive and it tends to be non-renewable.
Hmm. Yeah. So what else would you advise for newer nonprofits or nonprofits who are struggling and they're like, hey, but we're doing this. We are all evangelists, and yet, no one wants to support our cause, right? Or what do you hear as the common objection?
Well, what I hear as a common objection is not that they've done it and it doesn't work, more of it won't work for us.
So they're not willing to try.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, it it takes some dedication for a while. As I said, it's not instant money, but if you want it to be organic, if you want it to be sustainable, and you really have a passion for it, you begin by assembling the most powerful group of people you can assemble that represent the various constituencies that you want to reach out to. I'll give you a perfect example. Several years ago, I was speaking in a community, and part of the assignment I spoke to about 50 nonprofits, and then afterwards those that wanted to speak to me could arrange an independent appointment. And I was talking to this one group that was a social service agency that covered 5 counties in the state in which we were, 5 contiguous counties.
Mhm.
And we were looking at they brought their their results, their fundraising results, and there was one county where they virtually didn't have any money coming from. And it also happened to be the county that was the least affluent. Well, now people would normally make that assumption: oh, there's no money, so there's no, they're poor, so there's no money. Wrong, wrong. No. So I said, okay, so who on your board lives there? Nobody. Hello,
Mm.
there's the problem right here. You need to get a board member or two that are a part of this community, and they will have the networks that you need. Um, my CEO, Ed Hughes, is twice college president, and he raised about $5 million out of a community in eastern Kentucky that is one of the most impoverished communities in the country. They have like 20,000 people, no, 10,000 people.
Mm.
$5 million. Hello, the money's there. It may not be obvious that it's there, but it's there. People have to be motivated. Uh,
Yeah. Do you find that storytelling is not at all a skill that's being practiced?
Well, it's a real um, hot topic today. Everybody wants to learn how to do it. The question is,
Hmm.
whose story is it? Now, you can
Hmm.
have the story of the organization. I'd much rather talk about the story of the donor. So, Dmitri, what's
Hmm.
your story? What's important to you? And then you're going to tell me, like you told me earlier in the interview. It's very clear. And if I'm listening, really listening, then I'll be able to look at points that connect with what you want to accomplish with what I have to offer. Now, it's
Hmm.
important to present your organization in a narrative way, as opposed to tables and regulations and this kind of stuff that makes your eyes cross. And so
Hmm.
that's important. And you don't respond to numbers. I mean, you want to make it simply a narrative, something that conveys passion, something that is, but it has to be to a sympathetic audience. And that's often not the case because they've not judged what's really important to the people they're speaking with.
Hmm.
They've judged what they think is important, which might be two different things. But still, there's a place where people can meet together.
Hmm.
I like to tell people, just remember, it's the donor's money. Just remember that it's their money. And so if you can appeal to them on the basis of what they'd like to accomplish, hey, as we said earlier, Americans are pretty generous people.
Hmm. Last question. Do you think that in-person events, such as galas, are crucial for deepening those relationships?
Crucial, no, they can be effective. But the key with that is most organizations use those kind of events as revenue generators, not awareness builders. And as revenue
Mm.
generators, they're losers. I can run you through the number. I can show
Right.
you. They're just losers. Um, and I'm sure there are plenty of nonprofits that are saying, "Oh, but we make so much money." Let me just show you all the costs, and once you've subtracted all those, and on top of that, they tend to lowball people. They give people the idea they're being philanthropic when they're not, and then they're not repeatable. You can
Hmm.
you have to go back and start all over again every year, but you can use events as a community builder, as an informer. That's a wonderful way to get people in. Here's what I find more useful from that sort of thing is have your board members or some of your key leaders hold small informational meetings in their homes. 15, 20
Mm.
people. supply some food. It's in a home, and it's very clear when people are invited. There will be no solicitation. You're not going to be
Hmm.
hit up for money. It's important, very important to say that. And you use your board members in that way because they all have networks, and then you can throw some other people in too. And people will come to those things because they want to find out what's going on. It's an informational meeting. Um, Keep it short, like the actual program opponent, quote unquote, should be no more than 20 minutes. All right.
Hmm.
And then you get a discussion time, a social time, and there's food.
Hmm.
People like that. Um,
Yeah.
and well, here's something else that I've always found useful in a community. If you know of someone who has a home that everybody wants to see the inside of, well, that is a way to get people there, and they will
Yeah.
come. I want to be in. I want to see the inside of that house. You see, and is it sort of subterfuge? Well, yeah, but people are people, and they will come because the host has opened their home and they want to see what it looks like on the inside. Fine, if that's what it takes to get them there, and they get a chance to meet some other people. That's how things start.
Hmm. So small, intimate gatherings
Mm-hmm.
where people can actually feel a sense of community
Mm-hmm.
instead of larger, superficial events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you need to
Yeah.
keep them under 20 people
Hmm.
because group dynamics change as it gets bigger. People are much more willing to ask questions and open up if it's no more than 15 people.
Hmm. Yeah. Isn't that fascinating about our
Mm-hmm.
psychology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you get above 20, 25, it's a different kind of meeting altogether. uh,
Yep.
and then you have to make sure you have enough questions, usually by planting a few people in the audience who are going to ask questions to get things started.
Gotcha.
I've done that, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And how do you follow up with that? So you have this intimate gathering, you're not making any ask. How do you tend to your community?
Well, you have a person there who's, if not official staff, is assigned staff to be the scribe, the note taker,
Hmm.
observing who's speaking, what are they asking about, who expressed interest, what level of interest is there, and you have all that information, and then you have follow up from the organization. Hey, Dmitri, hi. I noticed that you were at the meeting and that you asked a few questions, and there were X, Y, Z. So tell me a little bit more about your interest. Um, and if I look for opportunities to involve you in some way, I still haven't asked you for a dime.
Yeah.
You see that?
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. I mean, because that's what people want. They want to feel like they can be helpful
Mm-hmm.
and they want to have that one-on-one connection,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
giving them a sense of community, this gathering, and then afterwards you're giving them a direct way to plug in to give you more information about what is it that they're actually looking to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a social gathering, it's easy to put on a mask or it's easy to hide back something. But if you and I are here connecting one on one, looking into each other's eyes, it's so much
Mm-hmm.
easier to just speak freely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and eventually money gets involved one way or the other, and the key is to maintain that relationship so that every time I talk to you, I don't have my hand out.
That's a difficult balancing act, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Usually, the ratio that I like to have people do is uh, five 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 instances of communication to every one solicitation.
Mm,
5 to 1.
interesting ratio. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So 20% of the time you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Only 20%.
Wow. So,
And I bet you 1 in 150 nonprofits will actually get close to that.
oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, they seem strapped for time. And so what I've seen is that if you gave any money, now you're being bombarded with
Yeah.
solicitation, and there's solicitation emails,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
right?
that counts as that's whether it's email, snail mail, text, whatever it is. That's a contact. And there
Hmm.
needs to be 5 contacts to every one solicitation. And the other thing about that is that I was going to tell you something about that. Yeah, there's that. Um, but that um, being asked too often is the number one killer.
Hmm.
It's continually the number one complaint that donors have. I never hear from you guys unless you're asking me for money. I just gave to you last month, um, and that too often stuff is an internally generated thing because they're not thinking in strategic terms; they're thinking in operational terms. Well, last
Hmm.
month we needed this. This month we need this. You see, that it's them. It's not the donor.
Yeah. It probably makes them feel like a parent with one of those teenagers that
Mm-hmm.
only calls you when they're like, hey, I need some more money again.
Yeah, Dad, the car's empty. Can I have the credit card to fill up the car with gas? Yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah. It's adolescent behavior. That's exactly what it is. I like that, Dimitri. I'd never heard it. I love this. You got
Yeah.
teenagers at home. That's what it is. They're always got their hand out. They want something from dad or mom if dad's not available. You know.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I have a teenager, so I'm learning,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Well, you've probably
he's got a better ratio than that.
Well, that's good. Well, you've probably experienced if you ask your mother, well, go talk to your dad about that. It's dad, go talk to your mother about that.
Uh-huh.
You're passing the buck. Who's going to give in?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Larry, I feel like this is such valuable information. I really wish that this was more widely circulated.
So do we. Uh, well, we
Yeah.
get there. You mentioned, I think at one point you mentioned the book that I wrote. It's about what 10 years, 11 years. It has received pretty wide distribution. It now is international, by the way. It's pretty
Mm.
much in Amazon in Western Europe and Asia. You can order it. Um, and there is an international version that's simply more or less an expanded version of the original. Because here's the thing, we call it the 8 principles, and we're talking about principles, not practices. Um, Human nature is consistent across the world, very consistent. Same stimuli, same reactions, you see. And so it's applicable everywhere. What's different is the way certain, the logistics and the practices of philanthropy worldwide. Now some cultures are more philanthropic than others. Some do it a different way. I know, for instance, we have an Indian group that works with us, and the Indians are very philanthropic, but they're a little bit different than everybody else. And for instance, they don't do direct mail. They send, I would talk to you on the phone or something, and then I'd send a runner out to get your gift, is what I would do. Very different in that way.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's different methods, but it's accomplished the same thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Hmm.
anything else you want to talk about, Dimitri? We could go all afternoon on this thing. But
Uh,
here's this. Maybe we make a point of doing this again. How about that?
I would love that. I would love
All
that.
right.
Yes, because I want to respect your time. And yeah, this this has been kind of opening a can of worms, and we could keep
Mm-hmm.
pulling out
Mm-hmm.
new strings, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love that.
All right. Well, let's do it again. And now
Wonderful.
that we've sort of established a field of interest, we'll pick it up then. And you'll also be able to give me some more updates on what your plans are too.
That's what I hope.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I've been having a delightful conversation with Dmitri Sunshine, and we're going to do this again. And what I like about Dmitri, well, first of all, he's a nice guy, and I like that. But beyond that, he comes from another country, who grew up in this country, who sees it as an outsider who's become an insider. And so he kind of has a little more sensitivity to some of the things that I think those of us who've lived here since we were born are pretty much blind to. We just accept. I want to pick his brain a little bit more about that when we come back. Thank you, Dimitri, very much.
Thank you so much, Larry.
All right, audience. Next time, somebody else with real ideas.